morning and welcome to First Unitarian. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing Building Bridges. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Welcome to Sunday morning at First Unitarian Church of Rochester. I'm Reverend AJ. I'm one of the ministers that serves this congregation, and I use he and him pronouns. Our church is a people with a mission. Our mission here is that through spiritual connection in community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. If you are new here, we offer you a special welcome and invite you to get connected. Come stop by our welcome desk so that we can get to know you a little bit better. And also we want to specifically invite you to our Inquirers series, which is a new offering that happens during connection between the services. So if you missed it today, you want to come early at 10:30 next Sunday to attend our Inquirers series. If you're here because you are going through a hard time, or you were worried about somebody else who is, please reach out and connect with our Pastoral Care team. You'll hear more about them later in the service. And Phil is in the back in a beige and rainbow stole who can connect with you during or after the service. A few quick announcements. One save the date is at the Interfaith Thanksgiving service. It's a tradition here in Rochester going back 150 years or more. It will be on Thanksgiving Day at 11 a.m. at Temple Sinai this year. So I'll be there, and I look forward to seeing hopefully many of you there as well. The Unitarian Buddhist Fellowship, part of our church, part of our adult spiritual development program, they're offering a new class on meditation for beginners and anybody interested in refreshing their practice. So that's going to be starting this Wednesday for the next 8 weeks. And we are looking for office volunteers on Tuesdays and Thursdays this fall. So for all those ways to volunteer and to spiritually deepen and connect with others, you can find links and details for all of that in our newsletter. And so then we begin our worship. We are led in worship this morning by Reverend Shari Halliday-Quan. We've got Amanda, John Randall is here to offer a testimony, and of course Pablo and the wonderful First Unitarian Choir, our AV team, and all of you here to make community and worship possible. So to ground ourselves and to begin this sacred time and in this sacred place, I invite you into a breath, whatever helps ground you. We acknowledge with respect the Seneca Nation, keepers of the Western Door, part of the Haudenosaunee people on whose ancestral and contemporary lands First Unitarian now stands. And I invite forward one of our families, Katie and her children, to light our chalice as we share in the unison words. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate.
As we sing Graff.
invite you to settle in more deeply into your seats, to feel the chair or the ground or the bed, wherever you are, below you, to feel this Mother Earth holding you. I invite you to settle into a time of silence. Whoosh. Whoosh. Imagine being on a beach with waves that wash over you. A tiny speck of the universe. Here, among so many other specks just like you, and yet totally different. I want to bring you not into this room yet, but a beach, a memory of mine. I was in middle school, and a friend picked up a pebble, one among many, among hundreds or thousands or probably millions, and said, "This one is so pretty." And it was. And someone else said, "Why this one instead of all the others?" and laughed. And others laughed. And though I knew it was pretty, I laughed too. So much comes between us and the beauty of the universe. Pluck a rock from your own memory. Something small, something pretty, and feel its weight in your hands. All of the universe lies there, beautiful, and surrounded by so many other pebbles, so many other rocks held by someone else's hand, so many other lives, the dead woven into our natural world, the weight of all that is lost, the heaviness of possibility in your hands. Each of our lives is held in a palm of love. And we hold these small pieces in our own hands to remind us that none of us are disconnected from that love. Too many lives lost, too many dead scattered on the beach with waves washing over them. For all who live in fear of climate, of a gentle name like Helene that brings destruction. For all those who mourn in Palestine, in Lebanon, and yes, still too in Israel, and yes, still too in Ukraine, and yes, still too in Sudan, and yes, here too in Greater Rochester, and yes, in our own hearts and lives. May the beauty of the weight that we hold never allow us to think that there aren't others scattered here on the beach. May we know within each of us the whole universe stretches out. May we know that our heaviness, held in a palm, is not too much. May we know that we are held in a palm of love that will never forsake us. Amen, and blessed be. So we enter now into ritual, having turned from our season of heat and water and stones to a season of cool, not in this room, but outside, of fall and fire. And we move our prayer and ritual forward in our service so that our children who often move from this room occasionally get to experience it with us. We move it so that the adults in this room who stay occasionally get to experience it with those of us who leave midway. So we bring what's on our hearts and we lay it on the altar of community and spirit. And I ask you to take a moment to figure out what's going on for you in your life that feels like it needs to be laid down. Some growth, maybe grief, maybe gratitude. Something big or small, but alive within you. And online, I invite you to share in the chat. And here in the sanctuary, I invite you to come forward to light a candle. And if you'd like an usher to bring a candle to you, raise a hand. Or send a neighbor to light one for you. Or to flip a switch if you prefer the electric. May we now share in this ritual of community care. May we now witness to one another's hearts. other and for the world is held in this community and is held in the palm of love. Amen.
Called When Will the Fighting Cease? I'll sing it one time and invite you to join me after. When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries.
So I want to invite the children to come forward for the time for all ages. Any children who want to come and sit on the carpet? My name's Amanda, and I'm the Director of Religious Education here at First Unitarian Rochester. It's so wonderful to have the children here for our ritual of community care today. And I hope that some of you maybe thought of a grief or a gratitude or some growth that you're excited about and lit a candle. Did anybody light one? I saw a bunch of our middle school youth light a candle. That was awesome. So when we light our candles during our ritual, get to hold the joyful things inside of us in community. And we get to hold the heavier things, which might be hard to be carrying alone, in community. It almost feels like we hope, when you light that candle, we hope that it can feel like for a moment that all of the people here at church are holding you for that moment, are turning toward you in care, and are listening deeply. So, that is what our Time for All Ages is about today. I'm going to sit here. I wonder if people can still see me. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I got some thumbs up and some... I'll stand. So, our Time for All Ages today is about listening. And I know that all of you are really good listeners. You're very good listeners. And I also know that young people, and I wonder if the young people would agree with me or not. I know that young people do a lot of listening. Do you feel like that's true? Yes. I heard yes, I heard school, and I heard torture. So, we really expect a lot of listening out of young people, right? They need to listen to us, the grown-ups. They need to listen at school. They often have to listen to their parents. And, it's not bad to listen. It's not bad to listen. But we expect a lot of listening from them. And so one thing I want to hear from you children, is what gets hard about listening? Is listening always just super duper easy? It's pretty easy for Soraya. She says, yeah, it's easy for her. Does anybody ever have a hard time listening? Sarah does. Violet, do you have a hard time listening sometimes? Yeah. And what gets hard about listening? Any thoughts? Particular things? Yeah. You want to make noise? Yeah. You don't want it to. Why has it got to be so quiet? Right? Yeah. Anybody else? What's so hard about listening sometimes? Yeah. Yeah. So Cora says, when you have to throw something away, and you can't. Is that what you said? And you don't want to. So it's like sometimes someone asks you, I'm getting so warm. Whew. Sometimes someone asks you to do something that you don't want to do, and you have to listen to them, right? You have to go do that thing. That's not easy. I wonder if our grown-ups have any ideas. What gets hard about listening? Anybody ideas?
When things are boring.
Yes. When things are boring, is it hard to listen? When you feel bored? Yeah. Any other? Yeah, Sarah.
Really busy.
When you're really busy. You've got a lot of things to do. Yeah, Stellan. When you have too much caffeine? I think some of the grown-ups can relate to that. Yes. When you disagree with someone, that can be a really hard time to listen, right? When you disagree. It's a very good point. So, thank you so much for your answers, for all of your honest answers. And now I have another question for you. And it's for you, and it's also for you. Is there someone in your life that does a good job listening to you? Someone in your life. And you can just think about that person in your head. We won't shout this one out. But for the young people, for the grown-ups, is there someone in your life who does a good job listening to you? And if you imagine that person, how can you tell that they're listening? What do they do when they're listening? And you can just think about. Well, do you want to give any answers? What does someone do if they're listening that you can tell that they're really listening to you? They're really listening. Really listening. They maybe look at you. They find some way to show you, not only with their ears, but with their body, and maybe even with their heart, that they are with you. Listening can be really very powerful. So, I'm guessing that some of our adults out here, when you were children, did you have someone that listened to you? Kids can turn around if you want to see. Grown-ups, did you have someone who really, really listened to you? Give me a thumbs up if you had someone who really listened. And give me a thumbs to the side or down if maybe you didn't have that. Yeah. And so that's a big deal. It's a big deal when you don't have someone to listen to you as a young person. And so my hope is that all of our young people here, they already have at least one of those people. But my hope is also that when they come to church, this is a place that they feel like they are listened to. That the grown-ups around them can put down their very important grown-up things that they have to do and turn their attention, their full attention, to a young person who maybe has something to say or wants to tell them something about themselves. So that is really my hope, that as a congregation, we can be that place for each other, but particularly for the young people that are with us. Because sometimes we really ask a lot of young people to listen to us, and we can sometimes forget, oh, right, I really should do that too. I should turn and listen to them. So the good thing is that I really honestly feel like this is a congregation that wants to embrace and that embraces already that challenge of like having young people fully among us. And I just have to tell you, as the director of religious education, I am so thrilled about that. I can feel that energy from you. Can you all feel, well, I don't know, this is a dangerous question, I guess. I hope that you too feel, that's what I would really hope for, that when you come to church, there's a grown-up or 2 or 3 that you could tap on the shoulder and say, hey, I want to tell you something, or this thing happened to me. I want this place to be a place for children's voices, and I think lots of you are in that hope with me. So, that's our story for today. May it unfold in your hearts until we meet again. And now is the time when we will sing our children out to their adventures.
We bless you on your journey through, from sheltering arms to the white sky blue, and your joyful jumps and your sad times too. You bless us by being you.
Our reading this morning is The Way Under the Way by Mark Nepo. For all that has been written, for all that has been read, we are led to this instant where one of us will speak and the other one will listen, as if no one has ever placed an oar into that water. It doesn't matter how we come to this. We may jump to it or be worn to it because of great pain, or a sudden raw feeling that this is all very real. It may happen in a parking lot when we break the eggs in the rain, or watching each other in our grief. But here we will come with very little left in the way. When we meet like this, I may not have the words, so let me say it now. Nothing compares to the sensation of being alive in the company of another. It is God breathing on the embers of our soul. Stripped of causes and plans and things to strive for, I have discovered everything I could need or ask for is right here in flawed abundance. We cannot eliminate hunger, but we can feed each other. We cannot eliminate loneliness, but we can hold each other. We cannot eliminate pain, but we can live a life of compassion. Ultimately, we are small living things awakened in the streams, not gods who carve out rivers.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is John Randall, and I'm a member of First Unitarian. Last year, through our school partnership program, I volunteered to tutor students in math at School 22, the Abraham Lincoln School in Rochester. I met the teacher, Judith Purdy, I was assigned to work with, and met with the students a few times. I had 4th, 5th, and 6th graders for 40 minutes each. Then, in a tragic accident, Miss Purdy suffered a fatal collision with a deer. She had been at the school many years and was an important part of the community. The school was in shock. After a couple of weeks, I wrote to the principal of the school and offered to come in 5 days a week to help get the school and my students through the transition. I was motivated by the relationships I had already formed with the students. I felt there was already an implicit covenant to show up and to try to help them understand basic math concepts. As I was finishing up my letter, I surprised myself by writing this. I am a dedicated Unitarian Universalist, and I believe in kindness and learning. As UUs, we sometimes struggle to name what we do believe as opposed to what we don't believe. It was a bit of a surprise to me that I should clearly name two things that I and we believe in. It's led me to explore further what kindness means to me and what it means to believe in it. It can be quite challenging sometimes to meet a situation with kindness, and I don't always succeed. But I do believe that in human relations, it leads to the best outcome. First Unitarian helps me practice kindness and provides opportunities to be of service and to live my values. Thank you. All that our church is and all that our church does is made possible by the time, talent, and treasure that we give to our shared mission. Members and friends support this congregation financially through recurring giving, and on Sundays, we also practice generosity through our shared collection. 50 cents of every dollar given now to our offering will go to the Unitarian Universalist Association's Disaster Relief Fund. Our climate is changed and changing. Every year, Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country face climate disasters, including fires, floods, hurricanes, and more. As insurance companies reduce or drop coverage for congregations, a healthy disaster relief fund allows our association to support congregations, their members, and their community partners to recover, rebuild, and improve climate resiliency when disaster strikes. In the spirit of abundance and generosity, the offering will now be given and humbly received.
Thank you to the choir. You are a joy to listen to. If you've been out of school for a while, you might not know that it's typical for teachers and professors to often share their slides or notes with students. Take notes, yes, but most of all, listen. They or you, as I look out at many a teacher and professor in this room, listen. Don't get caught up in taking down all of the details right now, but let it wash over you. Take it in. And so I know that you all are wanting to take fastidious notes on this sermon, but it's a Unitarian Universalist way, right? But it's in this spirit that I offer you these spoilers so you know how the sermon goes. You don't have to, though you still might, but you don't have to wonder once I start talking about geological features and pebbles and poetry. Where are they going with all of this? We'll begin with listening, and then we'll go on to talk about listening, and then after that we're going to end with listening. There you go, that's it. That's the whole thing. Because we continue our series on generosity, and last week we talked about hospitality, and among the spiritual teachers who most embodied and embedded hospitality into their spirituality is Saint Benedict. And Saint Benedict, who started a monastic order, wrote a book of guidelines, of policies, the Rule of Saint Benedict, it's called, and it begins with this word: listen. Listening is a cornerstone of generosity. And we begin here also because today marks another beginning in this congregation. It's the beginning of our fall campaign of our stewardship drive. And for those of you who don't know or who conveniently forgot, this church is primarily supported by the generosity of, well, people like you. But not so much people like you, but people who are you. And in the fall campaign, we go to folks who typically haven't given an ongoing gift before, or people who give monthly in a reoccurring sense, typically online. In the fall or in the spring, we go to folks who tend to give an annual commitment. And we go in a variety of ways. Sometimes that means you get an email from me or a letter or other sort of communication, but one of the most important parts of the way we cultivate generosity in this congregation is through our stewards. There are people in this room who take up the terrifying task of asking you for money. Or if they've already asked you for money in the past, asking you for maybe more money if you can swing it. Because everything we do together, and it's your money that makes it possible. And so these intrepid people who care deeply for this congregation, they tend to the life of the congregation. And one of the leaders of our stewardship team, Elise Wall, I saw her earlier, realized that our candles on our table were not lit. And so she calmly went over and lit the candles. Just like she calmly goes over and will ask about a third of you to consider giving more money to the church. It's nuts, but she does it. But she does it because she knows, and others like Elise know, that when we tend to the generosity of the congregation, it's not only about the financial health, but also the relational health of our congregation. Stewards try to meet with folks about once every 3 years. Sometimes you don't answer their text messages and emails and it bums them out, but we know you're busy. They try to connect once every 3 years because they want to listen. They want to know what's going on for you in your life and what it's like for you in the congregation. What matters to you? How is the relationship that you have with First Unitarian important? They don't only take on the terrifying task of asking others for financial support, they take on the deeply challenging task of listening deeply to one another. This is, of course, it's a part of our mission, and almost every week we start by saying, through spiritual connection, we listen in community. We listen deeply to others and ourselves. We open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. And that listen deeply is one of those actions that you think, like a lot of Unitarian Universalism, just makes common sense and is so easy until you really try to do it. Like Universalism that tells us that everyone is worthy, that tells us we are worthy. Like trying to treat people equitably. Listening deeply is a deeply challenging task because most of us are hungry or bored or disagree some of the time, or any of the other brilliant things that our children and adults named earlier as important barriers to overcome if we want to listen to one another. It's a difficult task. And so I just want to lift up the nuts who take this up. And if you have been a steward, if you're a steward this year, or if you have been in the last couple of years, or if you are sitting here thinking, gosh, that's really something I would like to do, there may be some of you among us. I'd like you to raise your hand or stand up, and I would like to give you an applause. The rest of you can do what you wish. But I invite you to rise so that people might know that you are someone who has taken up the task of deep listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The task of listening is something that Mark Nepo, the poet, writes earlier as an activity in which one of us will speak and one of us will listen, as if no one has ever placed an oar into that water. But that's hardly ever how any of us engage in relationship. The water is rich with life below the surface, and each of us enters into the task of being with one another with a whole lifetime of history and a whole lifetime of experience that sometimes gets in the way. Nepo encourages us to strip away the causes and the plans and the things to strive for, as if we could create a vacuum into which deep listening could happen, as if breaking the eggs in the parking lot would suddenly snap us into being fully present with one another. But I know that simply telling a child to be quiet hardly ever works to encourage deep listening. And I know, despite this thing that we all do every Sunday morning, that no matter how quiet you are, you're not really hearing every word I say. And many of the sermons, in fact, the best sermons that you have heard me preach, I have never said, but had something to do with what was going on inside you and filtering what I'm saying through your experience. It's natural. It takes practice. Listening, like being married, is not simply something that's done well because we don't do the opposite. There's a bad joke that says the secret to staying married is not getting divorced. And, well, there may be some truth to that, but the question is really not how do you stay married, but how do you have a happy marriage, a marriage of mutual respect, of growth, of understanding and learning? How can we be quiet with one another so that there might be respect and understanding and learning? Well, we practice. This past August, your board of trustees, your elected leaders, met for a long retreat. And among the most powerful exercises that they and we did that weekend was a listening exercise in which we were paired up and asked to listen to one another, to share an experience of our congregation. And in order to turn up the heat a little bit, to make it possible that we'd have some emotions or something boiling below the surface, the prompt was specifically to talk about a time in the congregation when things were hard. Because that sounds fun, doesn't it? What we found in that time of practice was that trustees who had been serving in leadership together, who had committed to being in deep relationship with one another, heard stories of other people's experiences, even close friends of theirs, that were dramatically different from their own experience. When they sought not to convince or to fix or to be right, but simply to understand one another's experience, they were opened to a deeper connection. And so I'm going to ask you to potentially find someone new. Now, I ask you to find someone new. You do not have to. That's different for me. Often I'm like, I'm going to wait. In this case, it's a vulnerable ask. I'm going to ask you to find someone new and spend under a minute sharing about a time where you felt listened to, or someone who listens to you well. And if you don't want to move, or you're not feeling like sharing right now, I invite you to just put a hand over your heart. That's okay too. But if you're willing, I invite you to rise and find someone you'd be willing to share with. Under a minute each. So I'll call you back in 2 minutes. If you haven't switched, I invite you to do so. And as you wrap up, I invite you to return to your seat and to center. Thank you for jumping into this exercise, for listening to one another or to your own heart, for creating, I think, quiet. Though it's hard in a room full of people to hear quiet, of course, but some quiet for one another. Listening requires not only quiet, of course, but other skills, things we practice here at First Unitarian. In our Soul Matters and Wellspring groups, we lift up the principle of no fixing, no saving, no setting one another straight. And the 9:15 people reminded me that it is not setting each other straight when I erupted in a fit of giggles for my inner queer. Because I couldn't figure out why you'd want to do that anyway. To not solve for one another, but simply to create space. But there's a third ingredient, and it's the thing that we just did for one another and ourselves, which is to create time. I want to share a brief story, though it makes me and Reverend AJ look bad, but they did an exercise, an experiment on what helps us attend to one another at Princeton Theological Seminary many years ago. These seminarians, these people training for ministry, were asked to give a sermon on the Good Samaritan. And so for those of you who don't know, in brief, the Good Samaritan's a story about somebody who is unexpected, who stops and helps another person. Now, I don't know what you all think of us, but probably you expect those trained for ministry to stop and help another person. But in this experiment, folks were asked to prepare this sermon, and then when they arrived, they were told that actually this was meant to take place across campus. And many of them moved across campus, and on their way, the true experiment unfolded. Someone was waiting there, someone in need of help, and many did not stop. Those who were charged to tell a bunch of people to stop and help others did not stop. But some did. And the difference was not about their background, who they were as people. The difference was not about how much training they had or how good their sermon was. The difference was not about what they ate for breakfast. The difference that made the clearest impact in whether or not these people training for ministry would stop to help one another was whether or not they had been told by the experimental lead when they were directed across campus to hurry. Those who were told to hurry did not stop, and those who were told they had plenty of time did. The third ingredient of listening deeply and well is simply creating time, holding space. Now, we know that contemporary life makes this deeply difficult, and it's not just contemporary life. There's a reason St. Benedict had to start with listen, because it is a centuries and millennia old problem. It is difficult. But here in our congregation, we take some special efforts to make this possible. We create spaces for all of us in congregational life, both in services and in Soul Matters group, to listen to one another. But we also charge particular people in the congregation with listening well. Our stewards, our board of trustees, but there's a third group, perhaps the best at this. Well, okay, maybe also the ministers and the choir and the AV team. And okay, it's actually all of us who are charged with listening well. But there is a group that is particularly trained and trusted to do this in our congregation. Our lay pastoral care team are the folks that we extend the work of the ministers and the ministry of this church with. Lay pastoral care is, at its simplest, in Reverend AJ's words, the means to journey alongside someone. Reverend AJ, who's charged with leading this team, along with Elise Wall, who's our lead volunteer, writes that it means that when you're in the presence of a lay pastoral care associate, you're in the presence of First Unitarian. First Unitarian enters into relationship with you, and it's beyond being a friend, it's beyond being a fellow congregant. It's made possible by the healthy boundaries of time and space. It's made possible by training and the trust that we imbue this group with. And it allows us to tend for one another in moments of need. And so, for this group that are called particularly to this work, we charge them and commission them with deep listening. And so I invite Reverend AJ and the lay pastoral care associates forward for this call.
Part of the reason that we do this is to, of course, offer recognition and appreciation to our lay pastoral care team, and also for the congregation to be introduced and see their faces and their names, so you know who you may be getting in contact with if you reach out to the phone number or the caring@rochesterunitarian.org email that are in the newsletter. So I'm going to read out the names, and don't worry, there are more folks on the team. Everyone was here at the first service, so everyone has been successfully commissioned. So I'll read out all the names, and if you are here, please raise your hand. So our team lead is Elise Wall, We have existing associates John Farrell, Ruth Myers, Mary Nelson, Jane Tuttle, and Steve Fuller. And we have a very special welcome to our newest pastoral care associates joining the team this year, Ginny Sones, Kathy Rita Cheplowitz, and Phil Porter. There you go. So I present you, lay pastoral care associates, to the members and friends of First Unitarian Church of Rochester and commission you to provide pastoral care to this body. Will you covenant now with this congregation? Will you remember that you do this work as a team and will seek counsel as needed? Will you promise to maintain healthy boundaries and confidentiality? Will you understand that it is not your responsibility to fix problems, but to offer presence and compassion? Do you all commit to accompany this community and its members in their moments of crisis and sorrows, while also celebrating in their joys? If all this you do, please say, "We will." Members and friends of First Unitarian, will you commit to supporting these leaders in their ministry, reaching out when you are in need yourself, and continuing always the shared work of caring for others in this community and allowing yourself to be cared by it? If so, please respond, "We will." May all of you on the team and in the congregation be blessed as you are a blessing to this community, and thank you to the team members for your service.
Stewards, trustees, our lay pastoral care associates, 3 teams all charged with particular types of listening. And yet this call lands upon all of our shoulders. And yet this place, what we practice together, is an opportunity to deepen into the act of listening. And so I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, and we'll take up that old and important task of listening and making a joyful noise. Let us rise and sing our closing hymn, "When Our Heart is in a Holy Place."
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our stories from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear the voices of each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and when God of heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. Then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place.
When we all pitch in and collectively do the work of church together, miracles happen. And on that note, after the service, I invite anyone who's willing to help stack the chairs that have arms that chairs without arms can remain where they are. But that brings us to the close of our worship and our time together. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice, our unison words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light.
When we listen to one another, it is God blowing, breathing, living within the embers of our soul. Go in love, go listening, go, burning embers. Know that you carry the whole universe within you, and so does everyone else. May you discover it. Amen.